There is a quiet ache in the life of a child who learns too early that their tears are best kept hidden. They move through rooms with a careful balance, a fragile poise that shields the world from the weight they carry inside. No one sees the tremble in their hands, the hollow echo in their chest, or the longing for a hand that will stay. The world, in its unintentional cruelty, teaches them that emotion is weakness, that vulnerability is dangerous. And so, the child learns to fold their sadness neatly, to swallow the soft cries that rise from their chest in the dark. Yet within this silence lies a story, not of surrender, but of resilience. A story of how hiding pain shapes the mind, the heart, and the soul, leaving traces that linger long into adulthood. The habit of hiding tears rarely emerges without reason. It begins in the quiet spaces of early life, where small lessons take root and shape the heart. A hushed reprimand for crying too loudly, a fleeting look of discomfort when sadness is expressed. A world that subtly rewards composure and punishes visible vulnerability. These are the seeds from which silence grows, planted with a mixture of fear, misunderstanding, and unspoken expectation. In many homes, emotional expression is filtered through unspoken rules. Be strong. Don't cry. It's not a big deal. Words meant to soothe can often convey, unintentionally, that sadness is undesirable, even shameful. The child internalizes these lessons, interpreting their own feelings as inconvenient or wrong. The voice that whispers, "It's okay to feel," is often drowned by louder echoes of judgment or impatience. And so the child learns to store their emotions, to bury tears behind a polite smile or an obedient nod. Society, too, plays its role. Gendered expectations, cultural norms, and the subtle messages of the media all reinforce the notion that certain feelings should remain private, hidden. Boys learn to suppress fear and grief. Girls learn to moderate anger and frustration. The child absorbs these lessons, little by little, building an internal landscape where some emotions are permitted and others are quietly forbidden. Early experiences of trauma or neglect can intensify this pattern. A moment of being dismissed, overlooked, or punished for emotional honesty becomes a lasting blueprint. The child begins to anticipate the reactions of others, adjusting behavior to minimize conflict, disappointment, or rejection. Over time, this calibration of expression becomes automatic, almost instinctual. Tears are hidden not just because of external pressure, but because the child has internalized the belief that their own emotional truth is unsafe to reveal. This chapter examines the origins of hidden sorrow, tracing how familial interactions, societal expectations, and early experiences converge to cultivate a child's quiet concealment. Understanding these seeds illuminates the context of their behavior. It is not weakness, but adaptation. The silence of the child is a response, carefully learned, a protective structure built from the earliest days of life. Yet within this silence, as fragile as it is resilient, lies the potential for awareness, growth, and eventual healing. Beneath the surface of hidden tears, the child's mind is quietly at work. Every glance, every carefully measured smile, is the product of an intricate internal calculus. The brain, young yet remarkably adaptive, begins to anticipate emotional outcomes, learning which expressions bring comfort and which provoke discomfort or rejection. This is not deliberate deceit, but an instinctive form of self-preservation. The child is learning to navigate an unpredictable emotional landscape. Neuroscience tells us that suppressing emotion is taxing. When tears are stifled, stress hormones ripple through the body, shaping both mind and nervous system. The amygdala, the brain's emotional sentinel, remains on alert, scanning for subtle cues of judgment or disapproval. Cortisol levels may rise, quietly strengthening the body's stress response. Over time, these reactions create patterns, heightened vigilance, sensitivity to rejection, and an unconscious readiness to mask vulnerability. The mind becomes a subtle choreographer, guiding the child to conceal what feels unsafe, even from themselves. Emotional regulation, a skill developed through experience, is both adaptive and costly in this context. The child learns to modulate facial expressions, tone of voice, and gestures, suppressing sadness and anger to maintain social equilibrium. Yet the effort leaves traces, a fatigue in the chest, a tension in the shoulders, a lingering unease that is never fully resolved. Suppression does not erase feeling. It transforms it into a quiet, persistent undercurrent, shaping behavior, decision-making, and perception of the self. Psychologists note that children who hide their tears often develop heightened empathy. In observing others to gauge acceptable emotional expression, they become attuned to subtle moods, learning to anticipate reactions and adjust accordingly. This attunement, however, is double-edged. While it fosters social sensitivity, it can also deepen the sense of isolation. The child perceives the world with acute awareness, yet struggles to fully inhabit their own emotional experience. This chapter illuminates the psychological and neurological patterns that underpin the act of hiding tears. It reveals how early adaptation becomes a lasting framework within the mind, shaping thoughts, instincts, and emotional responses. The child's concealment is more than habit. It is a living architecture of the psyche, quietly calculating the balance between vulnerability and survival. Within this architecture, the seeds of both resilience and challenge quietly coexist, guiding the unfolding story of a life shaped by hidden sorrow. Within the quiet chambers of a child's mind, a subtle struggle unfolds, a battle without words, fought in the shadows of the heart. On one side is the longing to express, to release the weight of sadness, the frustration, the fear. On the other side is the learned instinct to conceal, to maintain a composed exterior, even when the interior trembles. This inner conflict is constant, a low hum beneath daily life, shaping thoughts, gestures, and even the rhythm of breath. The child may want to cry aloud, to collapse into the warmth of an embrace, to let someone witness the depth of their grief. But years of observation have taught them restraint. They have learned that showing too much invites questions, disappointment, or discomfort. And so, a tension arises, the body insists, the heart pleads, yet the mind commands silence. Anxiety whispers, reminding them of past judgments, of the unspoken rules that govern emotional expression. This resistance is not purely emotional. It is deeply cognitive. The child anticipates reactions, running through scenarios where tears would be met with confusion, impatience, or dismissal. Every impulse to speak or release is measured against these mental scripts, and when expression finally slips, it is often accompanied by guilt or shame, as if the act itself were a betrayal of the self they have carefully constructed. The battle manifests in subtle ways: the hesitation before answering a question, the rapid blinking to hold back tears, the small tremor of the hands. These micro-conflicts accumulate, shaping identity and behavior over time. The child learns to ration emotion, like water in a parched landscape, allowing only enough to survive, never enough to truly flourish. Yet, within this struggle lies awareness. The tension between concealment and expression hints at the depth of the child's capacity for feeling. It is a quiet testament to resilience, to the ability to endure without breaking entirely. Understanding this inner conflict reveals that hidden tears are not absence but presence, an echo of the self that longs to be acknowledged, a pulse of humanity that insists on being remembered even in silence. There comes a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when the child or the adult they have become begins to notice the patterns that have long shaped their emotional life. A glance in the mirror, a pause in conversation, or the reflection of a familiar sadness in someone else can illuminate a truth that was always there. The habit of hiding tears is more than a protective shield. It is a lens through which the world has been experienced. Realization does not arrive as a revelation or a lightning strike. It is gentle, a soft unfolding of awareness. Perhaps it is triggered by empathy, when witnessing vulnerability in another awakens recognition in the self. Perhaps it is a moment of stillness, a quiet evening when the usual distractions fade and the mind finally takes stock of its own patterns. The child's learned silence begins to make sense, not as failure, but as adaptation, a way to navigate a world that did not always feel safe for open emotion. This awareness often brings mixed feelings. Relief can coexist with regret. Understanding with sorrow, there may be a sense of mourning for the years spent constraining the self, for the moments of tenderness denied, for the depth of feeling that was quietly pushed aside. Yet within this duality lies a kind of liberation. To recognize the strategy is to step outside its automatic grip, to see it as a choice made long ago under different circumstances. The mind, once engaged in constant calculation, begins to pause, to observe rather than react. Thoughts that once demanded perfection or composure are met with curiosity rather than judgment. The heart, long accustomed to secrecy, may allow itself a small tremble, a whispered acknowledgement of what has been carried silently. Even the smallest recognition, the ability to name the pattern, to see the shape of the concealed tears, marks a turning point in the story of self-awareness. Moments of realization illuminate the path toward understanding and integration. They do not erase the past, but they create a space for reflection, for the possibility of reconciling the hidden self with the visible world. In these fragile awakenings, the child and the adult they have become begin to meet, softly, compassionately, and with a quiet curiosity that promises the first real step toward healing. Healing begins, not with grand gestures, but with small, deliberate acknowledgements of what has been hidden. The child who learned to conceal their tears now discovers that it is possible to let emotions surface without fear. A quiet sigh, a slow breath, a single tear allowed to fall. These are the first threads, fragile, yet vital, weaving together a fabric of self-recognition and emotional safety. Integration does not erase the past. The habits of concealment, built over years, remain as echoes in the body and mind, but they no longer define the totality of experience. Awareness becomes a companion rather than a judge. The adult who carries the child within can observe old patterns without being trapped by them, learning to meet emotion with curiosity instead of resistance. Each act of acknowledgement, no matter how small, strengthens the bridge between the hidden self and the visible self. In this process, compassion plays a central role. The child's quiet endurance, once a survival strategy, is met with understanding rather than judgment. Moments of vulnerability are honored, not shamed. Safe spaces, whether a trusted friend, a journal, or a reflective pause in solitude, become arenas for practicing emotional presence. Here, tears can be witnessed, words can be spoken, and grief can be held without fear of rejection. Healing also involves reclaiming empathy. The sensitivity cultivated through years of observation and concealment can now be directed toward both self and others. The ability to perceive subtle emotions, once a mechanism for self-protection, becomes a source of connection. Pain, once silenced, can inform compassion, transforming hidden sorrow into an instrument of understanding and relational depth. Ultimately, the threads of healing are both tender and resilient. They do not erase the lessons of concealment, nor do they deny the survival mechanisms forged in childhood. Instead, they weave those experiences into a larger tapestry, one that honors the past while allowing the present to be lived fully. In these threads, the quiet child who hid their tears begins to meet life with both vulnerability and strength, discovering that the heart can be both tender and enduring, open and safe. Even when tears are long hidden, their echoes remain. The child who learned to conceal sorrow carries within them a quiet attunement to the emotional world, a sensitivity born of necessity, sharpened by vigilance and tempered by survival. This attunement, once a means of self-preservation, can become a profound gift, a capacity to recognize pain in others, to perceive what is unspoken, to meet vulnerability with gentle understanding. The echoes of hidden tears are subtle. They appear in the pause before a response, the careful observation of someone's expressions, the soft intuition that senses distress before it is voiced. In adulthood, these children, now grown, may walk lightly through social spaces, listening with an almost uncanny attentiveness, noticing the spaces between words, the tremors in posture, the shadows behind smiles. Their own silence has taught them to value what often goes unseen. Yet these echoes are not without their cost. The heightened sensitivity can bring moments of exhaustion when the weight of others' unspoken pain presses heavily on the heart. But even here lies a paradox. The same capacity that brings awareness to suffering also provides a deep reservoir of compassion. The child who once feared emotional exposure now carries the tools to respond with empathy, to offer recognition to the unseen, to witness sorrow without judgment. Poetically, the life of hidden tears is both shadowed and luminous. It is shadowed because concealment leaves traces, patterns of caution, moments of quiet isolation, the memory of lessons learned too early. It is luminous because these very experiences cultivate a depth of understanding few ever achieve. Within the careful preservation of self lies the ability to see the hidden lives of others, to honor their pain, and to respond with tenderness that is informed by lived experience. In the end, the story of the child who hid their tears is not only a story of loss or restraint, it is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It reminds us that vulnerability, even when concealed, leaves a trace that shapes empathy, that the quiet endurance of childhood becomes the foundation of profound emotional insight, that hidden tears, once safely acknowledged, echo through the heart, not as weakness, but as the gentle strength of a life that has learned to feel deeply, compassionately, and fully.